or could be over time, and I think a little bit that's going to be fleshed out group by group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want my fellow assembly members to know I'm seeing you, but I'm going to follow this process. I want each of you to have a chance to go through your series of questions without being disturbed, and I think we're going to have plenty of time to come back and pick up any other questions that we need to do. So, Mr. Trombley.
Hoping you could clarify under management rights, that'd be page 7 at the bottom for everyone. One of the concerns that I've heard is management's ability to negotiate on number 7 and 10. It says equipment, and one of the concerns I've heard is that is management going to be able to negotiate on safety equipment, and that the concern is that the bargaining unit no longer has that ability. What do you see as the definition of equipment?
I think you're hitting it right on the point. We're still going to have safety teams. Safety is, and I'll defer to Danielle on implementation here. But safety is still an issue. However, what we're trying to get away from is having a collective bargaining agreement. Essentially run the shop. Say how many trucks you can have. All these other things. We've got OSHA. We've got regulations, but we also have safety teams and safety groups, and we have a process. I mean, if something's happening unsafe and management's not responding, I'm sure you guys hear about it.
Okay. And then the other aspect is can you explain page 7 H again? I'm a little bit unclear about that. For example, if you're a police officer and you're on SWAT, you're obviously not on SWAT 24/7. I'm assuming, I'm not a police officer, I don't know, but say you're a patrol officer, but you also do SWAT. Do you get a, I don't want to use performance pay, but for lack of a better term, some sort of pay for the time that you are on SWAT, or are you still paid at your normal regular hours if you were on patrol? Same with fire, if you were on a specialty unit.
No, there is a supplement for SWAT.
There is a supplement for all those. Okay. And then the third question I have is, when it comes to the assembly choosing the contract, if there's the impasse, we follow that process, the assembly gets both last best options. Is there something, some sort of protection for either the bargaining unit or management? And the reason what I'm trying to say here is that let's assume that a bargaining unit is negotiating with an administration. And the bargaining unit says, you know what, the political makeup of the body is in favor of management, or it's in favor of the bargaining unit. So I'm gonna jack up my contract, or the administration says I'm gonna lowball everything because I know I've got the votes, and I'm just gonna hold out. Is there a protection measure for either side? Is there something that can be done aside from, because I understand the concept of binding arbitration, but at the same time I know that takes the financial aspect away from the people who are designated, who are allowed to spend and allocate money. So is there some middle ground? Is there some third option? I don't know. Or is that
not? I don't think there is another option, and that is the big question. Mm-hmm. You want to turn it over to an arbitrator, and then that's strictly a policy decision. Mm-hmm. But you want to turn it over to an arbitrator who might have a little bit more experience in labor law, but is not necessarily experienced with the municipality mm-hmm. whatsoever, and again is not tied to that contract? Or do you want to tackle it as the assembly, and it's the public, it's the political process? I think if a labor contract is rammed down with 6 votes, there's going to be some changes. And as the body changes, you're going to have an amended contract. There's always room to change these agreements. Sure. But it's got to end somewhere. The courts don't want to do it, sure. and shouldn't do it. Sure. I think they'd make a mess of it. But,
I understand.
And just if I get down into
sure.
That's one of the reasons too for putting in certain requirements in the ordinance that you cannot exceed, the 5-year average CPI, that sort of stuff, so that if one side, does have a more favorable political group, you still have limitations. You can't just really highball something. You've got a ceiling that's established in the ordinance, so
No,
it makes a big
appreciate
difference.
That makes it clear. And then, from a procedural standpoint, let's say a contract passes 6-5, does the mayor have the ability to veto that action? Or are labor contracts outside that veto authority?
I gotta say, I have never looked at that. I don't think it's come up that I know of.
Because if that's the case, then all contracts would actually take 8 votes. And that's the only reason I asked you.
I'm of the opinion from Mr. Wheeler that I don't have that veto power. I can veto motions as far as your effort to pass a contract or to approve a contract. So the individual motions, but not the, once it's approved, I cannot veto the.
Sure, and that language is kind of ambiguous. I was reading the charter earlier today on the mayor's veto authority, and it obviously doesn't make that clear that you can or can't, because they can't, you couldn't foresee everything. So if we could get some sort of legal opinion on that, I'd be really appreciative of that, please. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman?
I have several, so I'll probably take a few and then pass and then come back, because I know the interest of
Thank you.
time.
I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I thank you for your presentation. And in one particular instance, I think you even on page, I think I made note of it, on page 7, of the rights of employees to organize, and you represented 3.70030. And you had indicated, and actually made the comment, like this is, as in the past practice, that we're going to continue to allow this, there's nothing changed there. So it appears that in some languages in the portion of this code, is past practice is a good thing. And then later we come into trying to eliminate language that allows a third party or court or even the assembly to not be able to use past practice as a standard or a guide.
I think we're really confused in terms.
Well, I am confused, that's why I'm asking the question.
The later section, and it doesn't place any limitations on the assembly whatsoever, the later section strictly deals with grievance arbitrations, and it's a term of art in arbitration, past practice. I say a term of art, a very ill-defined term of art. Past practice is what the arbitrator can't find in the contract but wants to make happen. And we're at least trying to narrow that down a little bit. But it has nothing to do with policy or assembly or anybody else. It's simply in those grievance arbitrations when we're arguing about what a contract means, that they're not going to add to that.
Well, and the reason I find that significant and important is that to make and I think you even said this at the very beginning, it's a very large ordinance with a lot of changes. And to make a distinction of why we want to go here, we need to know where we came from. I think it's important. And I think it's been spelled out. There's some confusion on benefit packages and what's the holiday and what kind of pay and things of that nature. So my concern is that, and when it comes to benefits, I'll go to that, on the benefits section, Ms. Faglia, you're saying, well, you can still negotiate. There's still room to negotiate for the benefits. And from my personal experience, that when I came on the municipality workforce in 1985, every employee had the same medical plan. There were 2 sections of it. If you were an executive employee, you were at a higher dollar amount max capacity limit, what they call the ceiling. And we all had pretty much the same standard benefits. That was in 85. And so with the change in 89, it sounds as if maybe we've gone astray. So my question is why do we have to codify rather than sitting down and negotiating when apparently the negotiating groups have come to the organization, to the management, and have accepted pretty much every benefit plan the municipalities offer?
Actually,
so why are we codifying?
If I could answer,
yes.
Back in 85, that's when the rule had been put in, it was in this ordinance, that the personnel rules governed. We had standardized programs. We're also not as far down the road in this 40-year journey of making this just absolutely unmanageable mess. And there was a letter to the editor this morning that I thought was interesting about firing the negotiation team. Well, the people here that in the city right now who might be on a negotiation team haven't had a chance to mess anything up yet, so I think that's a little bit premature. But I can tell you from going back through records and records and notes and notes and notes, we've had high-priced attorneys, we've had smart attorneys, we've had smart negotiators, we've had people who are very well respected in the industry working for us. We've had a lot of other people. We still got this mess, and a lot of it's because it is very unwieldy. There are parts of the ordinance that were outdated, but the main thing is it's just been turned over to this overall negotiation. On the issue of holidays, if you bring up the subject, well, everyone celebrates Alaska Day, you guys do Sewage Day, can we just flip them? 90% of the time the answer is, what are you going to give me for it? And that's where we get these various plans. The other thing is coming up with establishing that there is something standardized and we're all living with it. Ms. Fagley is not going to gut her benefit plan just to gut a union plan. We're all going to be on the same page. We all got the same benefit plan. We can't write into this ordinance everything that might happen into the future. This is not a model contract. This is the 10,000-foot level saying this is municipal policy, and then there's room under that, whether it's in 330, whether it's in a CBA approved by the Assembly, MOUs approved by the Assembly. There's a lot of other things to fill in those blanks, because we could write tens of thousands of pages and we'd still be sitting here going, boy, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't affect things the way we want it to happen.
Okay, so I've got two quick questions, Chair, and I'll turn it over and then come back. So one of them in specific, the concern is we're trying to tie, and I hear you say the 10,000-foot level, but we get pretty specific when we're talking about wages, and we're saying that we're going to look back to 5 years CPI and the Anchorage CPI, and then we're going to then turn around and lock in no 1 year can exceed the last 5 years for a period of 3 years. Now, if we're looking for consistency, why aren't we saying 3 and 3? Rather than let's go back 5, let's go forward 3. Where did the number 5 and 3 come from?
The 5 came from the CPIU and the tax cap, the look back. And that's what we're using for the tax cap, so that's a figure that's there that people are familiar with, that we're using for other things. As for the 3-year look forward, right now in here, labor contracts would be capped at 3 years, and that's been Assembly advice. We're not going past 3 years on a labor contract. So that's as far as the contract should be affecting in the future. And more importantly, when you're predicting the future, every year you get out there, the more screwy your numbers are, because you're predicting the future. Next year, we can kind of see where inflation's going. But 2 years, 3 years from now, our errors get bigger and bigger. It gets less useful.
And just to be noted too, the state by statute limits their contract to 3 years, so that was one of the models we used.
I'm not concerned about the 3 years or 2 years. I think there are several administrations that have had 5. My concern is, why are we tying 3 to 5 if we're going to be consistent?
That's how the revenue side of it
3 to 5
from the tax cap is figured. So you have to tie in the revenue projections that you're limited with the tax cap, so you use that calculation from the revenue side and then use the other for the expenditure side.
And then lastly, my big concern is that this presupposes 2 things. One, that perhaps since 1989, this body, whether it be previous members or not, may have not. When has the Assembly not given, I guess, adequate direction to the administration to bargain for certain things in the contract that already, in their contracts that we would agree to under the code?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. There hasn't been a lot of Assembly advice. There has been from time to time.
I think we give resolutions.
Yeah, I've read the resolutions, and they don't make a whole contract, and they can be problematic. I came here just a couple of years ago. We were finishing off plumbers, and the advice was not to exceed 2.6%. Depending on whether you looked at it, we either offered 2.1 or we offered 2.5, depending on how many years. But one Assembly member was saying, you acted in bad faith because you didn't put all the money out there. Well, it's not to exceed, it's a negotiation. You can't just open your wallet and say, okay, what's the counter offer?
No, my whole concern, I think, more than anything, is that we're trying to change, as you say, a very big code, and in a real short period of time. Problematic. There's every time I ask a question, the response begs another question. So I'll pass for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I am going to make note, I received this little note from Mr. Flynn that this working stiff needs to return to work at 2:30. So we appreciate the fact you got here half an hour early, Mr. Flynn, and certainly understand your needing to leave. Mr. Stark?
Just a point of procedural clarity now. There's B questions on my list that I'm not going to ask because they're too timely or just my interest. But the process when we did budget was a question for one was a question for all. Is that where you want to go with this too? And how do I hear what Paul's concerns are and the answers therein without asking my own after this meeting ends?
Mr. Stark, what I'm hoping is we get through this and I'm able to open it up to all those questions.
Well, I don't know that we will because I've got, but I'm happy to have it, but I don't want to have a serial meeting discussion either.
But
So
what I would like is anything that we're not able to cover within this time frame, submit to us in writing and we will provide
Clerk?
answers to all of them to the clerk's
Okay,
office.
thank you.